Okay, so let's start off with what the final product should look like. I'm gonna run something that is not what you're seeing on screen there. So the first thing your program should do is maybe welcome the user and then ask for the name of a file. Um, so if they type in something that's not a real file name, you should have a try and accept to catch that so it doesn't create an error. And they should be able to do as much as they want. And it's nice if you give them a little bit of an example maybe so they know, oh, I'm supposed to put a .txt at the end. And then eventually, hopefully, they would enter a legitimate file that's in that same source here. Okay, I'm going to pause just a Okay, so once you've pulled in your file, the first option should be to count something. Let's say we want to look for the word love. And then the program should say how many times that word shows up. Honestly, I'm okay with you either counting the word as it is or even finding how many times it's a substring, which turns out to be a little bit easier to do. For example, the word glove, should that count as love? The way I did it here, no, it would have to be the word love. But I'd be okay too if you just looked for any time that set of characters shows up. You're just counting how many times it shows up. Next thing you're going to do is find. Let's also try to find the love. And here you can see the word showing up. And it should include a little bit of space around. I don't care how much, but you do want to have a little bit, ideally a little bit before and after, because that seems like it could be a useful feature. And then the ability to keep searching, that's just extra credit, so I'm not going to cover that here. So let's turn to the menu. Third is search and replace. So let's say we want to find hug and replace it with big hug. And then you can print out a little piece of the text. You can save it as a new file. You can give the user a note that I've been replaced and the file is located here. I don't really care too much what you do as long as you do a correct search and replace. Encode the text. So here we're just using our Caesar code. Any shift, you could shift from between 1 and 25. You could let the user choose, although they're probably not going to know what you're talking about. So it might be better just to have you choose the shift value and then shift using that Caesar function. 5 is your own creative feature. Here I put all the text backwards. I'd want you to choose something else. Things people have done is did a search for a certain word from the text on the internet, or maybe they counted the number of times each letter appeared in the text, or they, what else did they do? Some people just put in something like play a song that is inspirational, and then they figured out how to input a song in there. I don't really care what you do. I just want you to do something of your own there for number 5. Doesn't really even have to tie into the text, to be honest. 6, you should allow them to put in their email address, and let's say they put in something wrong. I probably didn't put a try and accept here. We'll see. Waiting. Yes, I didn't. So that's one thing that we do need to have. We do need to have a try and accept. Notice that once I hit that error, it locks me out. So in yours, I want you to put a try and accept around the send email. So if this were to happen, if they would have a fake email or it wouldn't work, then it would just say email invalid and then let them try again, or maybe return them to the main menu, whatever that would be. And then the final thing it should do is quit. So number 7 should quit. So how do we accomplish that? Well, that's a lot of stuff, right? So there's a menu going on there. That's kind of a core. From the user's point of view, that's really the main front and center thing, and that's certainly what we want as part of our project. So that's going to come down here, but it turns out there's some other stuff going on in the background that the user doesn't necessarily see. So The first is the comments, where you put your name of the project, summarize what your program actually does, and then you'll do all your import statements. So import random. You'll actually have all the email stuff too. So your final thing will probably look something like this, or maybe even more, depending on what your extra feature is. But those imports usually come right there at the beginning. Next, we often do the functions. I grabbed the file first, but it would also make sense to have all the functions next. So either way is fine. Let's talk about getting the file. So you could just ask them, what's the name of your file, and then save that, and then do a with open statement to try to open the file and read it. The problem is the file might not exist, and if that's the case, it's going to crash your program. So that's why we want to pack this into a try and accept. So what this will do is, if they enter a invalid file name, or it's not stored in the same place, then it won't crash the program. It'll just go from plan A down to plan B. It'll give them some info. Please make sure it ends in .txt. And then, this is important, this is all in a while loop. Why? Because if they didn't get it right the first time, well, it would go down here, and then it would just continue with the program, so it's going to crash the program sooner or later anyway if they had an invalid file. So that's why we want to make sure we kind of encase this try and accept in a while loop. It's going to keep running until this works. When this line works, then we're good to go, because it means it was a valid file name. And so what happens next? We only make it here if the file's actually valid and saved in the same spot. If that's the case, let's save the entire contents as a single string. Remember, we could do something like this, and that would save as a list of strings where each item in the list is a line from the text file. But that would just get horrible to analyze, to be honest. So read saves it all as a single string, which is much easier to analyze. And then we break. Why do we break? If we didn't break, even after we got the correct file, it would keep running the while loop, and it would ask them to enter the file again and again and again. They would never get out. There has to be some way out of this while loop, and that's what the break does. But it only triggers if they made it past this step to right here. Otherwise, it's going to skip the break and force them to keep trying to enter the file. Okay, so now we have the file, and it's called contents. Now we have all these functions. Notice that the functions we have, and we might have more, by the way, but these are just some that I put here. Notice that I'm calling contents into each of our functions. That's because we have something called the global space, which is your entire program, and then you have local space, which is inside a particular function. And the two spaces don't interact real well with each other. So instead of trying to be inside a function and referring to this contents that's in the bigger world of our program, it's much better just to slip the contents into the function. And to be honest, it's not because I typed the word contents here. It's because when I call them, so for example, if they would choose option 1, I'm going to call count contents. This is where the word contents actually matters, because this is what I'm calling my function on. So it's taking the contents of my entire file and slipping them into the count function, which I'm defining right here. Okay, so we get our different functions. This is where we're gonna go through the contents, count a specific word. Here we're gonna do a search and replace. Here we're gonna use our Caesar code. And then, let's see, I'm not sure, this was probably more of a testing thing. Here we need to give option a value. what's going on here? Well, we're going to be running a while loop for our menu. This will give our user as many times as they want to interact with our text until they quit. So how do we know when they quit? Well, we're going to give them the option of number 7 to quit, and when they type that, then option is going to equal 7, and the while loop will no longer run. But in order to get into the while loop in the first place, we need to have option have some value. It needs to be something not equal to the quit value. So, I mean, we could put option equals dog or hippo or whatever you want, or a blank space. It doesn't matter as long as it's not 7, because if it was 7, then when we tried to enter our menu loop, it says while option not equals 7. Well, it does equal 7 here, so it would not even let us in for the first time. So this can be anything other than 7, but it does need to be defined before you hit this while loop here. So we have our program. These will not be comments. You will do something like print, welcome to my program. And you'll do, give them what the options are. And you'll probably say something like, choose a number based on what you want to do. Something like that. Make it friendly, make it your own. Don't just copy what I had here. And then you're going to put each of these. Each of these are going to be a print statement, right? Print like that, and so on. Then you're going to have them actually enter the choice. Here, you were just printing. You never actually had them interact at all. But here, you're having them enter their choice, which should be 1 through 7. That will get saved as option. And then you're going to do a series of if-elifs. So if option equals, remember you have 2 equal signs there to check if it's equal. And also, make sure you have a string. If you have this, anytime they read in input, it's going to read it as a string. Now you could put integer input, and then you could have something like this for each one. But if you don't put that, realize that it's going to read the one as a string, and this should be in a string. Okay, we have the if, and then in each case, what do we do? Well, if it's just a couple lines of code, you could do it right there. If it's going to be a little bit longer, here's where it's cleaner to just go ahead and define a function up here that does whatever you want to do with the contents of the file. And then you just call that function down here on contents. So that will keep the menu portion of your file really clean and simple. All right, and you really only need to just have the first 6, because if they put quit, you don't want to trigger these 6. You just want it to hit back to the while. It'll be locked out if they put 7 for quit. And at that point, you can say goodbye, and you would print something like thanks for playing, or whatever you want to say. Use your own words here. Don't just copy my words here. So now that's the basic idea. Now you're going to one by one have to figure out, well, what does the count function actually look like? How do I take a string and count how many times something appears? Do a Google search, or maybe you have an idea of how to do it on your own. Either way, that's fine. Do a Google search. How do you replace a word with another in a string? This one here should be your Caesar function, and the email, I have another video for that. That really should just be calling the send email function. You shouldn't need to get too fancy with that one. And then of course your creative feature should be in there also. All right, so that's the basic get started overview. Feel free to be in touch. Good luck.